and I take the privilege to ask the first question, actually. I have one question for both Ali and Yosuke is, given the city is growing as more urbanization happens, developers and owners building more projects in the city, as an architect, for both of you guys, what are the most challenges you guys faces these days? I mean, when you approach a project.
Yes, I think like for all projects which we doing, maybe looks too crazy or like too aggressive, but like so we not like trying to ignore or avoid the condition of the economical side, like the construction cost or square meter, but at the same time we believe this is part of the value which skyscraper can produce. So we trying to share this kind of vision with the client every time. This is also another part of like a value which the skyscraper can have it. So that's I think for the difficulty is the beginning, like we can share this kind of a challenge with the client. But at a certain point of the project, it's coming to a more realistic stage. We always have this difficulty with the client to go beyond this like a square meter or like a coverage or efficiency issues. So I think like now, but some of the client is really willing to have same vision with us to challenge, to see what the new possibility of the skyscraper now. So we believe like in a few years we're gonna see some new challenge as well in the reality.
Maybe in some ways we're trying to do similar things, which is to look for relevance of a public space in that context, although we probably employ very different formal methods to deal with that. But I think what remains a really critical issue is indeed how to redefine the value systems through which things are judged and through which things are defined and executed ultimately. I think the entire discussion on, for example, Craig showed a lot of interesting things with facades that could make energy and all kinds of technology actually is quite far at this point. The possibilities are quite far. The question is, at what point do you get to employ them sensibly and how? And if we look at the reality of things, the vast majority of buildings is built for commercial purposes by developers that actually usually sell these buildings even before they are built, which means what is built doesn't matter that much because it's made the money already. So it just has to be good enough to not frustrate the people that bought it. And I think that there needs to be a change of maybe even of that system, but there needs to be a change of understanding of what certain qualities are and how we can achieve them. If we talk about sustainability, obviously in that world, it's very difficult to embed a lot of technological intelligence in a building because construction cost goes up, but they can't sell for that much more. So in the end, it's a reduction of profit. So very simply, it's not going to happen. And as long as the mechanisms are such, then also developers have neither the incentives nor the need to really do that. There may be some exceptions, and it's obviously great to find them and to work with them. But if we look at the bulk and the mass that dictates reality and our society, I think there's a real issue that needs thinking.
No, you raise a very valid point there about the sort of mechanisms that exist to sort of prevent a lot of this. And, it concerns me, but it's life, it's reality. But what we do find is that with a lot of these technologies, and it's perhaps no surprise to anybody, that there's a lot of university buildings, a lot of government buildings. There's those kind of drivers which actually allow some of these technologies to be implemented, refined, perfected, developed, and get the attention as maybe a stepping stone to wider adoption. But for a lot of what I was talking about, that's certainly the route it's gone down.
Question for Craig. You talked about the resurgence of timber construction, wood construction. Personally, I haven't been on a wood frame project in about 20 years, but I've heard this a couple times before during the conference here, that there seems to be this resurgence of the use of timber. What do you think is driving that? Has their technology advanced now that it's more applicable to the types of projects that we're using? Or what do you think is driving this resurgence?
Yeah, no, good question. And I think it does center around, you know, every now and then you get these step changes with a lot of materials. And with timber, the step change that we've seen is, and I did show it on the slide there, cross-laminated timber. It's the beauty of a manufacturing technique which allows you to create a bloody great big slab of timber. Thick, long, 16 meters long, well, I don't know, 6 meters wide and, you know, 800 mil thick if you want to. And you combine that with the CNC technology, you know, it's obviously competing with the precast concrete market. And precast concrete is a little bit burdened by the fact that it doesn't lend itself to CNC computer machine production, whereas timber does. So I think that's one of the things. I think there's also the issue of embodied energy, the realization that it matters. The better the growth of managed forests and, you know, also a little bit of a glut of timber coming out of Europe. And certain parts of the world, and I'll just give a little plug here for New Zealand, which are really embracing timber and looking at it in the most extreme conditions, earthquake conditions, and coming up with some really good technology to say, okay, this lighter material in an earthquake environment actually makes sense, and we've got all these little gizmos and ways of doing it which actually mean that it performs very well indeed. So it's a cluster of those things coming together.
Some of the works which were shown today have remarkable variations of form, space, and order. And the works which have been displayed appear to challenge the conventional sense of architecture in every way. As designers, what are the challenges that you face when you come up with such forms and the conventional, when you challenge where the basic forms of structure, basic forms of MEP system services, whereas it might be a more conventional way, perhaps the client wants it that you build more conventional buildings, but since you've chosen to, you know, sort of break the path, how do you actually put these buildings together along with structural engineers and MEP engineers and host of, you know, other services, vertical transportation and every other form of construction that goes into this?
Well, to a certain extent, the projects I showed, although they depart from maybe the typical appearance of buildings, but they're mainly not derived from a desire for form per se, but they're in a way derived out of a very systematic understanding and studying of a lot of the systems, both on a technical level, but also on levels of efficiencies. You have to exactly understand the core, how a core works. For example, I taught at Hong Kong University as a guest professor a whole studio on cores, I called it core values. To understand how a building core works, how it dictates efficiencies, and how it allows or disallows for changes in typology. So the interlace that I showed, the stacked horizontal pieces in Singapore, this thing performs at the exact same efficiency levels than other commercial things. And if it wouldn't, we wouldn't have built it. And at the same time, it enables to offer a lot of additional qualities, additional space that actually raise the value. And if you're not able to operate within the value systems, either of economics or of technology, obviously there are big problems. And I think the goal is to bring together an understanding of the existing with an understanding of the new and the possibilities, and push that forward into realizing those projects.
It's about day one, having a very clear vision about how something that might be a non-conventional form does actually work structurally. It's about getting principles right, and that, you know, building is a good example of one where the structural principles were defined at the get-go. It wasn't a retrospective thought, it was about coming together very early to make sure that it was sensible.